Hey everybody, this is Games Plus James, and today we're going to take a look at creating a logo dissolve effect, just like you see on the screen here. And we're going to do all this using just particle effects in Unity and without having to use any code at all. So to create this effect, we need to set up a few particle systems that will control various things that are going to happen in our situation. So the first thing we're going to need to do is show whatever logo we want to use. Now you can use any logo that you want to use, so it doesn't really matter what you're using. So I'm just going to use this Games Plus James logo here. Now if I drop it in the scene, we can see it here, that's fine, but we don't want to use it as just an image by itself. We want to make it work in our particle systems. So for that, I'm just going to delete it here. What we need to do is create a material that we can apply this logo to. So I'm going to right click here. I'm going to create a new material. Where are we? Material. I'm going to call this the logo material. And we're going to change a couple of settings on it. We're going to change it from being the standard shader to being a particle shader, an unlit one. And we're going to change the rendering mode to fade so that we can make it fade in and out. And we're going to change the color mode. No, we leave it on multiply. So then in albedo here, we need to put our image. So I'm going to drop our square image in there. So you go, you see it down here. And you'll see if we pick a different setting, for example, on opaque, you get these blue borders around your image and stuff like that. Cutout looks okay, but it won't actually work for us. So we want to stick with fade on our little guy here. So that's fine. The next thing we'll do is set up a particle system to use. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to effects and create a particle system. I'm going to make sure our rotation is at 0, so we've got everything on 0, 0. And then on our particle system here, I'm going to rename this to be our logo image. So this will be our logo effect, and this will be the image. And then what we're going to do is, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to turn off shape, so everything just appears in the exact center here. And then I'm going to scroll down the bottom to renderer, and I'm going to set the material that we made in here. So at the moment it's set to the default particle system, that's why it's this white kind of shape. So I'm going to grab this guy, pop that, oh sorry, no, wrong one, logo material, that's what we want, pop that in there, and there we go, we now see our image. But what's actually happening is, if I turn off 2D here, you can see, oh, it's creating a whole load of them, and they're drifting off into the distance. That's not really what we want to happen. So we'll just leave this here so we can see what's happening. So what we're going to do is go up here to emission, and change this from rate over time. We're going to put that at 0, and we're going to add a burst of 1. So it only creates one little image. Now obviously our little guy here is also very, very small. We want him to be much bigger than this, so I'm going to change his start size to be 5, and that roughly looks like a good size for us there. And we're going to change the lifetime to be 4, so it's going to survive for 4 seconds. Now you can see what's happening at the moment here is it just appears and then disappears. That's not really great for us. We want it to fade in and then fade back out again, so it looks a bit more interesting. So how we can do that is, if we scroll down in the particle system and go to color over lifetime, I click this here so it's activated, and then we click on this, we see we get a gradient editor. So what I can do is go to the alpha value up on top here. I'm going to move this to about 25%. So we know if our lifetime is 4 seconds, then 25% of 4 seconds will be 1 second in. So we're saying, hey, at 1 second, we're going to have it be full alpha. And if I just click anywhere here and then drag it back to the start, we'll set alpha here to be 0. And now we get a nice fade in effect. So it fades in and after 1 second. And then we're going to wait till we get to about 75. So we'll wait 2 seconds more. And we'll say it's 75. We're going to tell it to start fading out. So the last one at the end here should be set to be 0 as well. So it fades in. Oh wait, we didn't get our guy. There we go. We keep losing the 0 for some reason. Oh, I keep setting it to 0 location. Sorry, I'm typing in the wrong one altogether. There we go. So now we'll see it should fade in. It's not doing that now because I kept setting the location of this stuff to 0. There we go now. So we've got the fade in and fade out. Nice and gradual, that's perfect. That's all we want to do for this particular particle system, because we want to do a bunch of them together, which will create our combined effect. So with that done, we're going to right click again. We're going to create another effect, another particle system. We're going to again make sure we rotate it around to 0. We want the position of it to be 0, 0 as well. Like so. So now it's in the middle of our little screen here. And then what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to set it up so that it makes a bit more sense for us. Actually, just looking at our logo, we're going to set the speed of this guy to be 0 so it doesn't drift into the background. It doesn't really make much difference for us, but we'll just leave it so it's staying in the center. I'm going to switch back to my 2D view here so we can see what's going on. I'm also going to rename this to be logo particle simple, like so. And then what we're going to do is, first thing is we're going to stop it gradually spraying all these particles out. So I'm going to go to my emission and change the rate over time to be 0. And then we're going to change the burst amount to be really, really high. So we're going to set this to be 5,000. So you see we get loads of these little guys spraying out. We then also need to say our max particles up here. We need to set that to be 5,000. So we're actually setting the correct limit. What we'll also do is make these much smaller. So we want a lot of them and we want them to be smaller than what they currently are. So I'm going to change the start size to be about 0.25, like so. Then we're going to set a few other things. So the lifetime, we're going to give it just give it 2 seconds for our particles to live for. We'll set their start speed to be 0 also, so that they don't go flying off anywhere. I'm going to just stop our previous guy from running so we can just get rid of that for a second. And back on our logo here. So what you can see happens is all our little particle effects appear and then disappear. So at the moment we have a duration of 5 seconds, which we won't change our duration, but what's happening is every 5 seconds it's creating these 5,000 particles and then it's making them last for 2 seconds. But what we want to happen is, so for example, if I do this now and highlight both of these at the same time, they'll play in sync together. If I stop them and play again, they'll play in sync together. So what's happening is you can see the particles are being created straight away at the same time as our image is fading in. And that's no good. That's not what we want to happen. What we actually want to happen is our particles to appear when our logo starts fading out. And we know that our logo starts fading out at 3 seconds. So what we'll do is add a start delay of not quite 3 seconds. We're going to make it 2.95. So it's just before our logo appears, or our logo starts to disappear. So now again, if I highlight both of these, we'll stop and play. So what should happen is when it fades out, there we go, we get our little guys appearing just the way it should. Okay, so that's working, but obviously at the moment that's not really great. I'm going to stop our other one again just so we can have a clear view of what's going on here. We don't want them to appear in just a little tiny circle like this. So what we're going to do is go to our shape down here. We're going to change this shape to be a rectangle so that it matches our logo. Our logo image is in this rectangle here. So in our particle here, we're going to make sure we have a rectangle shape as well. And we're going to change the scale of this to be the same as we set for the size of our little guy here. Now obviously we don't want it just creating a square like this, but what we can do now is, if I just go back to our image and stop that so it gets rid, so the image doesn't show up. But what we can do here in our shape is where we have a texture here, we can click and drag our image into this slot. And now you can see when the little guys appear, they create roughly the image that we have here. So whatever image you're using, it'll create the exact a copy of it here using particles. So now that we have our particles, what we can do is give it a second. Yeah, so we see them coming in and out just the way we want. So now that we have them, what we can do is start doing something a little bit more interesting with them. Rather than just have them appear and disappear, what we can do is scroll down here to our size over lifetime. I'm going to check mark this. I'm going to click on here and we can see we have a whole bunch of defaults set up here. So I'm going to select, let's go with this one here. So then you can see they shrink down in size over time. So it makes it look like they're fading out now. We'll also, we'll add a color over lifetime effect. So I'm going to click on this. And what we're going to do is make this interesting by, I'm going to click and drag this a little bit away. And let's say roughly about here. We don't need to be too concerned about the accuracy of it. We're going to start it off with an alpha of 0. We're going to go to the end, will also have an alpha of 0, but roughly about this point here will be full. So we've got a bit of color at this point. And then when we get to here, let's click and drag this to about here, we're going to change the color to a kind of blue color. If we actually make it blue would be handy too. Roughly about there-ish. And we'll make sure that when it gets to this point here, it stays white like that. So then you see what happens is our particles fade in as white and then they turn to blue, which is fine. But we don't want our particles just staying in place. So what we're going to do now is go to velocity over lifetime. I'm going to turn this on. And here where we have some different values, I'm going to go to this drop down at the end and select random between two curves, like so. So then we got X, Y, and Z values here. So I'm going to set on the X. If I click on it here, we get this little map down here, and I can click and drag over on the right hand side, drag that up, and on this one here, we're going to drag it down. So immediately you can see our particles are starting to move on the X axis as time goes on. So on the Y axis, we also want to move. So I'm going to click and drag this up here. Can be a bit slow to react sometimes, just because I'm recording as well. But now you should see our particles start to spread out as we go. And actually, just looking at this here, just to make this stand out a little bit more, I'm going to go to my camera and make sure this is a black color, just to make this make a little bit more sense. So now I'm going to select both of my logos. I'll stop and play them, and you should see it fades in, and then we get this little effect of a dissolve. So even just this little bit here, we could stick with this and we'd be pretty happy with that effect. But we want to make it even more interesting than this. So what we're going to do is now I'm going to duplicate our particle simple. So I'm going to right click on this and hit duplicate. I'm going to rename this to be our particle swirl, like so. And now that we have this duplicated, actually I'm going to select these other two and just stop them so that they're hidden from view. We've got our particle swirl here. Let's make this a little bit more interesting. First thing I'm going to do is change it so that our start delay is a little bit earlier. So I'm actually going to make this one be about 2.9-ish. Should be okay. We're going to randomize the lifetime a little bit. So we're going to select random between two constants here. So between 1 and 2. So now we'll get them fading out at different times. So if we watch them, we can get a little bit more interest going on there. We're also going to make sure that we have a lot more particles for this, because this is going to be doing a little bit more action on the screen. So I'm going to say our maximum particles will be 10,000 and our count will be 10,000 under emission. So we'll let that go. You can see there's a lot more of them there now. And then the next thing we'll do is we'll make a bit of a change to our color to make it stand out a bit more as well. And for that, what we're going to do is go down to color over lifetime. I'm going to change this. I'm going to get rid of this white color. And I'm actually going to drag a white into about here. And we'll drag a white over to the other side. So it fades to blue and then white again. And then on our fade, let's pull this to about... Actually, no, we'll delete that. And we'll delete that. And yeah, that should be roughly okay. So if we look at this now, we're getting a little bit more interest going on with our little color effect there. And now if we combine our two particle effects together, let's see how this looks. For the moment, it'll just look like there's a lot more of them. But you can see there's a bit of variety in color in there. So now we want to make this actually swirl and move around on the screen. And for that, we're going to go down to noise down here. I'm going to make sure we take this to be true. You can see straight away, it immediately does this kind of cool effect, just based on the defaults. I'm going to make the strength change using a curve. So I'm going to select curve and we're going to select, let's go with this one here. You can see it starts out nice and simple then and then bursts into a wavy pattern more as it goes. We can change some other things too. We can change the scroll speed here. If we set this to 1, what it means is the noise effect will change as it goes. So you can see it changes here and that gives us much more variety in our particle effect down here. It's a little bit more interesting, a little bit more active for each individual particle. And because we've got so many particle effects here, we're going to change the quality to medium. So we know we don't have to worry too. It's a little bit more, or a little bit less of an impact performance-wise on what it's doing. Okay, so now we've got this cool kind of swirl effect. If we now have a look and see how this looks with all three of our images together, our three of our particle effects, you can see now we're getting it fade and swirl away, which is pretty good. We're pretty happy with this. But one thing we'll do is add another little effect to make it look like in the end this is kind of burning away. So at the moment it's got this kind of white and blue, which is kind of the colors I'm using for my little guy here. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this and we're going to rename this particle burnout. Now this one's going to be a little bit different, so I'm going to unselect these first of all. I'm going to make sure they stop. And then if we select our little particle burnout, so we're going to do a couple of different things with this guy. So first thing I'm going to do is make his duration way shorter. So I'm going to make this just last 3/4 of a second. We want this one to happen a little bit after our other particle effects happen. So I'm going to set this to be 3.2. We're going to set our lifetimes to be a little bit slower. So 0.5 and 1 should be okay. Then our start size for this guy, we're going to make this one a little bit bigger. And we're going to change the number of our particles back down to 5,000, our max particles. So we're going to change our emission here as well. Rather than just changing this down to 5,000, I'm actually going to get rid of this burst altogether. So we'll select that and hit the minus button. And we're going to change this to be rate over time. So now we've got this constant kind of swirling of our particle effects. It's still being influenced by our noise because we copied it from the particle swirl up here. But we're going to make some changes to our noise as well. So I'm going to scroll down to our noise here. And we're going to change the strength to just be this time be a constant 1. So it's a little bit more active the whole time. Because we're using rate over time, we want them to be constantly sticking to the same strength. We'll change our frequency. Let's put this up to 1. There we go, again, a little bit more of a dancing motion. And we'll leave our quality down on medium. Now that we have that done, we're going to change how our size and our color look. So size first. I'm going to manually change this a bit because I want it to ramp up as it goes. So I'm going to drag this over to the side here. Actually, no. Right, I'm going to stop this running just because it's eating up a bit of resources as I'm doing it. I'm going to right click here to add a key. Drag that up to the top, and then we'll drag this down to the bottom. So if you play again now, it'll wait for the time for it to start, and there we go. We've got it kind of swirling and they're growing and fading out, which is perfect. I'm happy with that. We're going to adjust our color then. So our color over lifetime, I'm going to select this. This one's going to be a little bit more filled in, so I'm going to delete that white. We'll bring our blue, our light kind of blue, back to here. I'm going to go to here and select a darker blue. So we'll go into our dark blue. I'm going to stop this again just because there's so many particles it kind of gets a little bit laggy when you're trying to do this stuff. So I'm going to make this a darker blue. Like, oh wait, no, that was the wrong one. Select the right color. It'll be handy. There we go. So we'll make this darker blue, put it into there. Then at this point here, we're going to make it turn into a kind of yellowy orange color. So it starts looking like it's burning out, and we'll end on a much darker red color. And we'll actually pull the color of it down a bit like that. So we're also in this area here going to make sure that we stay fully visible in this little range here. And now if I play, we should get this looking a bit more once it appears. There we go. We're getting a bit of color involved here now. So that looks perfectly fine. We've got all those in place. So now if I select all of our particle effects together, I'm just going to stop it and play. So we see we fade in, we have our logo, and then it fades out and swirls away. But we have this particle system going on the whole time. So we don't want that, obviously. So let's go back to our particle burnout. So how do we stop that? Well, we need to make sure we uncheck looping on this one, because this one in particular will keep doing those particle effects over and over again. So with that unchecked, we can select all of our things again and hit play. And now we see we get the burns out and fades away. Now you might notice that there's a little bit of a weird flash there, and that's because our particles are appearing in front of and behind our little image, which is obviously not really what we want to happen. So to fix that, we can just, if we select all 3 of our particle effects here and not selecting the image one, if we go down to our shape here, we can set the position of it on the z-axis to be 1, which means that particles will always, if we turn off 2D, the particles here will always appear behind our little image. So you'll see they'll always be just behind it. So with that done then, now that we have our 3 little guys in place, so now we've got pretty much our particle system looking the way we want it to. But there's a couple of extra little enhancements we can do to make it look a little bit nicer. So if I just select them all again, we'll restart them. So we can see we've got our image fade out, and we've got our particle effects, but they kind of look just like boring little circles, little flat circles. We want to make them light up a bit so they look bright as they burst away from our logo. So to do that, we're going to go down here. We're going to create a new material, very simply, and we'll call this our particle burst. Might as well, nice and simple. We'll go to our particles and standard unlit, and we're going to change the rendering mode to be additive, like so. And we need to give it an image so it looks interesting. So I'm going to go here in our albedo, hit the little circle beside, and we're going to select the default particle effect, which is, it looks like a black with a white circle here, but when we select it, because we're using this rendering mode, it actually just selects the white area of it. And then if we go back into our particle system, scroll down to the bottom and go to renderer here, where we slotted in our logo material previously. Now we can slot our particle burst into material here. And now, if we can get all of them running at the same time, we should see what happens is, there we go, everything looks nice and bright. What happens with those additive materials is when there's particles on top of each other, it means they'll combine together to be increasing their brightness. So when you have a few together, it looks brighter. When you have one by itself, it looks like the kind of simple image. One final thing we can do just to make this more interesting also is just very quickly, if you're familiar with the post-processing effects in Unity, if you have the package installed, I can go to my main camera here. I'm going to very quickly just add I had it already there, a post-process layer. I'm going to add a post-process volume. We're just going to set this up very quickly, add a new profile, add an effect of bloom, and if we turn this on and turn the intensity up to 1, now when I can press play here, it doesn't matter. Our bloom isn't applied. Oh yes, of course we need to make sure that this is global, and then I'll just select these again rather than plain. You can see we now get an outline around our little guy, and our little particle effect just looks a little bit better. It's just to add a little bit of snazz to it. If you don't want to use the post-processing system, or you're not familiar with it in Unity, it doesn't really matter too much. It just adds a little bit of extra snazz to what's going on. So the final thing we'll do then is just create a new particle effect to hold our little collection of particle effects here. I'm going to set the rotation of this to be 0, and we'll set all of these values back to be 0. And all I'm going to do is turn off our emission and shape and renderer so that none of those things are under control at all. And at the top up here, I'm going to set on stop action, I'm going to select this to be destroy. So when it gets to the end of its action, it destroys itself. So I'm going to set this to be 6 seconds, turn off looping. And now when I hit play, we should get our particle effect appears, does this cool little burst away, and well, it's decided to keep looping around. Oh, well, of course we didn't actually set this up properly. What we need to do is select all of these, make them a child of the particle system we just created. And if we hit play this time, it fades in, plays true once, does this nice little burst, and disappears. Now what happened there was I didn't set these to not loop. We don't want them to loop either. There we go. Press play again, and we should get them all. Appear the way we want. Fade away. And at that point, you could load into your game. So say if you want to use that for your effects when you started up the game to show off your studio name or whatever, you could do that. But it's a pretty handy little system. It takes a little bit of time just to go through, and you can obviously play around with the color values, especially of your particles, can create some interesting little effects along the way. When you have this particle system set up like this, it'll actually combine all your little particles into one. So when you play, it'll always play them together, which is also pretty handy. But it's pretty handy. Then you can change the color, you can change the image you use, you can use whatever image you want, and it'll always copy it and make some cool particles to match up with that image. So there you go. A relatively simple little effect, but it's pretty cool, and it adds a little bit of extra pizzazz to your game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon for more tutorial goodness.